Hello, I'm Robert Simmons. I'm speaking to you from my home in New Zealand, and this is the second preview video for the Alchemy of Stones workshop that I'll be offering next June of 2020, the 11th through 14th of June in Burlington, Vermont. And that 4-day workshop is going to incorporate all the work that I have been doing in the last 4 years and many new things that I've learned about how to work with stones more effectively and to experience them on a deeper level. So today, I want to talk to you about some of the stones that we'll be using that I think are some of the most powerful and some of the most interesting and helpful stones in the mineral kingdom. And we'll be working with all of those in the workshop. And in addition, I want to talk a little bit about some of the processes that I've been experimenting with and using on myself and finding rewarding and taking things a step further than what we've done by and large with stones so far. So let's get into it. And even if you're not going to come to the workshop or not considering it, I would still say there may be things in this video that you'll find interesting because I am talking about stones that if you're interested in crystal energies and stone vibrations and healing and waking up spiritually with stones, all of that is in here. So first off, when I offer these 4-day workshops, which I only do every few years, I always make sure that they're highly experiential. I want people to have experiences with the stones, not just listen to me talking about them. So everybody will be issued a bag of stones at the beginning of the event, and usually there's probably 40 different kinds of stones that I think of as high energy and important stones that people will be able to experience and benefit from during the event. So I've just picked out a few of them that are here in my studio to talk about today, but when we get into the whole event, there'll be many more. So the first one I want to mention to you is, sort of my original and all-time favorite, Moldavite. And I've got a couple of samples here to show you. I know everybody that has heard the word Moldavite probably knows what they look like, but this is really one of the favorite ones out of my collection. It's quite a big piece and very nicely formed. Moldavites all come from what's now called the Czech Republic, and they fell there in a meteor shower about 15 million years ago. That's the only place on Earth that this stone has ever been found, that just in that region, and it is the only gemstone that has ever been found anywhere that actually fell from the sky. And Moldavite is associated in legend with the stone of the Holy Grail, and the stone of the Holy Grail was said in some of the legends of the Grail to be an emerald that fell from the sky. So when you look at Moldavite, you see that green color, and you can see that even from the shape of it, it looks rather like a droplet of something that might have once been liquid and fell through the air. And in fact, that's exactly what happened with it. A giant meteorite hit the Earth in the Czech Republic about 15 million years ago, and the power of its explosion when it hit was so great that it vaporized itself and the earthly rock that it came into contact with and shot that vapor up into the air, where it eventually cooled in the stratosphere and came down still quite hot as droplets of liquid glass. And so the droplet shapes that Moldavite comes in are reminiscent. They show you what generated its existence, this event. So it's interesting that the Grail legend says that Moldavite was an emerald that fell from the sky. You almost couldn't put it better. It was also believed, because they associated it with the Holy Grail, to be kind of the stone that you might say catapulted the hero of the Grail legend into his destiny. Because once he beheld the stone of the Grail, he could never be satisfied by anything but following his path of evolution and spiritual development. And I think that Moldavite has that effect on us. It certainly did on me. I didn't feel crystal energies at all when I first got involved in stones. I was a jewelry designer. My wife was a crystal healer, and she's the one who told me that stones had energy. I couldn't feel it. She got me to meditate with them, and after about 6 months of it, holding a stone, a Moldavite stone in my hand while meditating, I had a huge awakening, and all of my chakras opened up, and so did my sensitivity to crystal energies. We had a shop by that time, and the day that that event happened, after I sort of calmed down after the huge inrush of light that opened up all my chakras, which came into me through the Moldavite stone, up my arm, to my heart, and then up and down my whole chakra column. After that occurred, and I got quiet enough to go to work, we went to work in our crystal shop, and I found that I could feel, for the first time, every stone in the store. So Moldavite will always be the stone to which I feel probably the most gratitude, because that's what set me on the path that I've been following for the last 34 years. I'll show you, actually. This was my very first Moldavite piece that was my own, and this is the one I was holding when I had that big awakening. Interestingly, you see the shape of this one. Some years later, decades later, Kathy and I went to Czech Republic to see the Moldavite fields and to see if we could find one. And she did find one. I didn't find one, but I found some guys who had just dug one up. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, that looks so much like my original one. I've got to buy that if they'll sell it. And they did. So here's the one that I found that day in the Czech Republic from those diggers. And here's the one that woke me up. It almost looks like they're mates, doesn't it? So what can I say about Moldavite? I want to go quickly so you don't have to listen to me talk all day to get through all these things. Moldavite's energy is like putting the accelerator down on your spiritual evolution. It can catalyze all different kinds of events, but the common denominator is that it's whatever is needed for your path to open up and move you towards where you're meant to go, meaning where your soul or your deep self wants you to go. And I found that with many people. Sometimes it's chakra openings and new capacities opening up like it was with me. Sometimes it's as simple as a job change or a relationship change, or sometimes it's connecting with spiritual guides, or a number of synchronicities happening that show you where your path lies. All of these things happened to me when I got started with Moldavite, not just the activation of my sensitivity, but also all the rest of those things: relationship changes, job changes, new insights, connecting with guides, and much more. So I guess you can tell how much enthusiasm I have for Moldavite. And every time I offer a workshop, we always include Moldavite as one of the stones that everybody works with. So it will definitely be in the stone bags at the Alchemy of Stones. Now, another stone that was probably the second one that really came to me with a particular resonance with who I am and what I needed is called phenakite. And phenakite is the stone that most amazingly seems to open up the third eye. And the third eye is the part of us that is visionary. It's right in this area. It seems to correspond with the prefrontal lobes of the brain. And that's where I feel it when I hold a piece up. This is one of my phenacites from my collection. This is a Brazilian piece, and quite a beautiful thing. It grew in this form naturally. So with almost all phenacites, the way I engage with them is I put them up here to the third eye, and I invite the energy to come into me, and then I also offer my my willingness to work with the stone back out. So I do it on the inhale, I invite the energy in, and as I exhale, I offer myself out. And this has become my way of getting introduced and connecting with just about every stone I work with. So one of the things we'll do at the Alchemy of Stones workshop is practice engaging with stones that way. Usually it's through the heart. And I like holding stones in here at this place, the heart chakra, and inviting them in and offering myself out to them. In a way, it's more correct, or it's more universal, I guess is the right word, to do it this way than to do it up here at the third eye, because the heart is the center of our energy field. And it's the place that our deep self has its spark. So the true wisdom in a human being is in the heart, although there's a lot of intelligence in the brain. In any case, phenacite stimulates this visionary, this area in which visionary experiences seem to take place, and probably that's why it's been called the third eye. So moldavite and phenacite work hand in hand very well. I would frequently use a moldavite on my heart and a phenacite on my third eye and meditate that way, and a tremendous amount of energy can circulate through your chakra column and through all of your cells and everything else if you take it far enough when you use these two together. So in our Alchemy of Stones toolkit, definitely both of those will be here, will be there. So another one that is, again, very strong for these upper chakras where illumination is experienced by people quite often is this stone called natrolite. And natrolite generally comes from Russia. This one is of a kind of extinct variety that was found in New Jersey. But right up there, if you put that up there and invite it in, you get huge pulses of energy right away. And again, this facilitates both activation of capacities that are latent in our brain and our upper chakras, and that means visionary capacities and the ability to travel interdimensionally. It does that. Phenacite and natrolite are kind of like, they cover a lot of the same vibrational territory, and yet they are somewhat different at the same time, but both are very powerful. One of the things I might do with them, if I was really working up here, would be to put the moldavite or the phenacite up here and the natrolite here at the crown. And oh man, what a pulsation I have already just doing that for a few seconds. So my idea of doing this is, not only does it feel good, but why does it feel good? And I think the reason this thing is a kind of pleasurable sensation is that it's opening up something that's meant to open up, that we're evolving into, that we have latent in us, but we haven't fully activated yet. And these are capacities of spiritual awareness. You could say that perhaps these stones help knit together the energies of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. That might be too physical of an explanation, because it may just be that it's our energetic body that is really getting stimulated. That's one of the things I wanted to say and put out there for you to think about crystal energies. If you're into this at all, you probably are able to feel them, tactily in your body or your energy centers. And what I think about that is that that is actually what they call the subtle body that is feeling that. And our subtle body The other name for it is the imaginal body, and it occupies a place via which it overlaps with our physical body and with the realm of pure spirit. And in a sense, the subtle body is the way that we have a bridge between the world of pure spirit and the physical world. So activating your subtle body with these high vibration stones is a powerful way to become more spiritually aware and to bring that awareness into your incarnated physical self. So, that's exciting stuff to me, and it's one of the things that we go into a lot when I'm offering a class, like the workshop we're getting ready for. So I've introduced 3 now. I want to bring you to another stone that's only been in the world of human beings for a couple of years, meaning it wasn't discovered. It was underground and not known about until 3 years ago, I think. And that's this one, which is called pink amethyst. So that's a little geode of it. I hope you can see that. It's quite pretty. And the color is really, this is a polished piece. The color is really a kind of a cranberry pink. Some are almost a rose quartz pink. But they've been analyzed chemically, and here's another one that I really like. They've been analyzed chemically, and they're found to be amethyst, not rose quartz. And what makes them this pinkish color is a greater amount of hematite, iron, in them than is in regular amethyst. Now, what's pink amethyst about? Pink amethyst is all about awakening that heart consciousness that is I have associated with what I call the deep self. So as I'm sitting here, I'm putting a piece, that geode, over my heart, and I can feel much different kind of energy coming in than what I was doing with the phenakite and natrolite, and even different from the moldavite, where moldavite is energizing and activating. Pink amethyst is it's softer. Its currents are really gentle, but they're very pronounced. You wouldn't have any trouble noticing them. But where some of the things that I was working with in the beginning part of this are kind of exciting in terms of they provide excitation to our subtle body, this is calming, centering, deepening, and I feel my center of self moving down, 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 down into my heart when I hold this there. So that's something we all need to be able to do, because without the heart, we can have all kinds of mental experiences and we can have all kinds of visions, but grounding them in physical reality and making them a part of our life, for that, heart-centeredness is essential. And my own belief is that unifying the mind and the heart is probably the most important piece of work that stones can help us with, if I could pick one. There's so many more that it's probably silly to pick one. But anyway, that leads me to the other stone I want to introduce you to with pink amethyst, because they're a pair. This crystal is called Lemurian mist crystal, and it was found in Colombia, again, only several years ago, around the same time that this was discovered. This, by the way, the pink amethyst was found in Patagonia, Argentina. So Lemurian mist crystals, they have, you can see the sort of bluish, foggy mist that's inside this. That's the thing that makes them different from other Lemurian crystals. And they do have the crosshatch ladder-like lines across the body that distinguish them as Lemurians, but they have their own special vibe. So what I found when I've experimented with these new stones, a couple of years ago I started, is if I put the Lemurian mist crystal here and the pink amethyst here. Both the upper chakras up here, the third eye and the crown, and the heart chakra get about equally energized. And then as I'm doing that, a corridor of energy joins them. And this is an experience. When we experience that, we're experiencing in our subtle body this union that is one of the important goals of the alchemy of stones. Actually, I guess at this point I'll mention that in alchemy, in spiritual alchemy, I should say, the idea, the goal was union of the whole of ourself. It was what Jung called individuation and what we call wholeness. And the idea is that we have two selves. We have what we call the surface self, or some people might call it the ego, that tends to be centered up in the brain, and most people think that that's the only self they have. But the alchemists say, no, there is a deeper self in the heart, and that is, in fact, the deep self, or the true self. It's the self that is the center of our subtle body and is the most directly connected to Sophia, which was the alchemical name, or the alchemist's name, for the soul of the world, or the feminine divine. So if you can picture all of that I'm just talking about, what I'm saying here is that in spiritual alchemy and in the alchemy of stones, one of our main aims is to bring this heart self and the mind self into union, and energetically that actually feels like all of this and everything in between it is filled with light and filled with positive vibration that we experience as pleasure. And all of that is, when this is fully developed, that whole continuum in our body, or that is sort of with our body, with our physical body, it's in our subtle body, all of that is activated, and self is all of that. So when at that point, if I was there and if I said, I, who is speaking is my heart, my mind, and everything in between. And one of the big things that makes me keep going with working with stones and integrating it with alchemy is that this is palpable. I can feel it. I could feel it just now when I was showing it to you. And maybe you can even feel it when you watch this. But for sure, if you are stone sensitive, and if you come to the workshop or somewhere else where you can get together with these two stones and try them out this way, most of you will feel that corridor of energy and feel the unification of those two centers of awareness in you. It doesn't happen permanently necessarily the first time you do it, but you can feel it the first time you do it in most cases. And what I found is that repeated experiences of these sorts of things bring you to a place where it becomes your way of being. And that's the goal of spiritual alchemy as well. The alchemists believed that they worked in harmony with the soul of the world, or with nature, and that their way of working was to lend their intention and give their attention and use their imagination to recognize what the soul of the world is trying to do, and to lend their energy to that to help it go faster and become more fully incarnated in the world. So that's what I'm about. That's my whole reason for writing a book called The Alchemy of Stones, which is coming out next year, and also for offering these classes and doing videos about it. I've recognized that these things are real, And that's a big thing to me, to recognize that we have these undeveloped potentials that will really make a difference in our way of experiencing life and in the life of the world. So I love to talk about this, and I kind of go off on tangents about it whenever I get a little chance to. But, this is part of me trying to share with you the feeling of what the alchemy of stones is, and of how the stones are a part of that. Because, one thing I would say, and I've said this many times, I look at the stones as the angels of the spiritual earth. If you look at the Bible, the angels in the Bible were portrayed as messengers of the divine. If the divine had a message for a human being, an angel would come and deliver it. And the angel was always very faithful in terms of delivering the message as it was given, so that the human being received it clearly. And I think that stones do that energetically. I think stone energy is basically the messages of the divine of the earth, or the soul of the world, being always, always, always offered to us. And the stones are always there to deliver these messages. And the messages are not frequently words. Usually, the first thing we experience when we receive this message is energy. But and this energy, in my view, is one of a multitude of flavors of love that the world is offering us. So that's the soul of the world calling on the phone right now. Sometimes she calls. But in any case, what I want to say about this is that there's much that we can open up and unpack about the experience of what these angels of the earth are offering to us from the soul of the world. And as I said, the energy is the first message. But you can also have visions when you work with these stones meditatively. And the visions will show symbolically messages of meaning to us. When I write my books, that's what I do. I'm meditating with the stone, usually at my heart, and I get to the place of resonance with the stone being, that I can begin to receive the messages. And usually it's about the nature of what the stone is for, if you want to say that, in regards to how we can work with it. And that comes as imagery that is symbolic. Then I translate that into the things I write about what the properties of the stone are. Very occasionally, there'll be words that come directly to me, but usually it comes through imagery. And that's why imagination and the development of imagination is key to the alchemy of stones. The ancient alchemists had a special name for the kind of imagination they did in their spiritual work. They called it true imagination. True imagination is very different from fantasy. Fantasy is all centered around the ego and gratifying what the ego wants. True imagination is what we might also call visionary experience. You use, like in shamanic journeying, if you want to experience true imagination with a stone being, you might visualize yourself going down a cave till you find a door, and on the other side of the door the stone being will be there to meet you. And the first part of that journey is something you deliberately imagine. And when you reach that door and the stone being is there, it'll be there in a form that you hadn't preconceived. And what takes off from there when this works is that you're having true imagination. It's imagery, but it's not composed by your ego. It's not pre-planned. It happens spontaneously, and it teaches you things. So one of the many things that we'll do at the Alchemy of Stones workshop is go into the process of true imagination to learn the nature and gifts that a number of the different stone beings have to offer us. And I can lead you through this. We've done this before, and the people who write down the messages they receive often find that they're receiving almost the same information when they're working with the same kind of stone. They express it in different terms, but when you hear 4 or 5 people who worked with the same stone at one of these events saying what they heard or what they saw, you recognize it. It's like, oh, that's just like that other person over there just said. And she was working with the same stone as me. So these are validating experiences that give us energy to pursue this path further. So, this is one of the things I like about going into these workshops and getting a big group of people together and working together. Part of what happens is we build a field of energy just by being together and having all these stones with us and doing this work purposefully. And other things that happen are individual people have awakenings and new experiences they didn't expect that come courtesy of our partnership with the stone beings and with the soul of the world, Sophia. So this stuff, it happens every time we do it. I was just in Japan offering some classes, as I said, and like virtually 100% of the people in each class, got it in terms of the experiences that they were being led into happened. So I have a lot of confidence that when we do our next one in the USA in 2020, in June, it will be like that there too. So now, okay, let's talk about a couple other stones before we finish this one today. This one is one I quite love. This is, I call it New Zealand white azestulite. Azestulite is a whole other story, and you can look at my azestulite video on YouTube if you want to get kind of the backstory about it. But it's a stone that it's different from everything else in that it carries an energy that was programmed into it, you might say, by an angelic group soul being that calls itself Azez. And Azez also means the spiritual light of the great central sun, which is the holographic core of the divine in every particle of matter and in all of being. That's a mouthful. But when azestulite was introduced to me through a prediction, that was part of the prediction. And we were instructed when the stone arrived to call it azestulite. The thing is that it is basically chemically, it's all the azestulites, and there's about 20 kinds now that have been discovered. All of them are varieties of quartz, but they carry this characteristic energy that is not in other quartz. And it activates and stimulates light in every cell of the body. Just in the same way that all the different species of stones carry a different frequency or vibration or a different note, if you want to use a metaphor of music. All the different azestulites have a somewhat different spin or vibe to them, and yet the main energy of them is recognizably the same energy. So New Zealand white azestulite is one that I've found here in New Zealand about 3 or 4 years ago. And it is a very, very pure vibration of that central sun light. It's inwardly, I experience it as a gold white light. This, if you invite it into your body, you can feel all throughout your body, little like subtle energetic fireworks going off, and it feels like there's a little spark of light that is flashing in every cell when you meditate with it deeply. And of course, that's something that is, again, I think, in the subtle body, but it's part of incarnating the divine aspect or the spiritual self into our physical body that azeztulite in particular facilitates. And the subjective experience of all this light in your cells is, I believe, that's our perception of that happening. So we'll work with a lot of azestulites in the Alchemy of Stones event, and I look forward to doing that always. And I would say that ever since I've started offering workshops, azestulite of all the different types has been a mainstay in terms of stimulating powerful experiences for people. So there's one more stone I want to show you today that will be a part of what we do at the Alchemy of Stones event in June of 2020, and that is this one. This is called Saarlite azestulite, and this is a crystallized form of azestulite that is, again, only found in New Zealand. Quite pretty, huh? And this is a different energy than the white smooth stones, this white New Zealand azestulite that I showed you a moment ago. One thing about Saarlite azestulite, just physically, is that it comes in very different variety of forms. Most species of crystal don't come in such a wide variety of forms and shapes as Saarlite azestulite does. And that's interesting about it. I feel like I'm not even really sure why this is the case with this stone, but what I can tell you is there's something very special about its energy among all of the azestulites. Saarlite azestulite is, I would say, the most purely angelic of all the azestulites or of any stone I've ever worked with. So these are big pieces, but we have small ones too. I put this against my heart. And peace just spreads all through me. Just beautiful, soft, loving peace. Sometimes, if you meditate with it for a while, the angelic aspect of the stone overshadows you, and you can actually feel the angel body superimposed on your own body. Some people, including myself, have even experienced this sensation of wings coming out of your back, and extending way out in both sides, energetic wings. But I've often wondered if there's something to the depiction of angels as having wings that has to do with this energetic sensation that we can feel with some of the angelic stones, and in particular the Saarlites. Saarlite, by the way, the name comes from the Hindu word Saura, which means the great central sun. And so it's the stone of the great central sun. And one of the things I've learned about Saarlite that I didn't know until just this last year is that it can be a really wonderful stone for doing self-healing work. I had problems that were very stubborn in my physical body, down in my lower two chakras, and one day I just kind of got the urge to try Saarlite, and I put one right down between my two lowest chakras and another one on my heart, and meditated with those and lay down with those for a while, and that peace energy just filled me up, and I noticed about 10 minutes into it that all my discomfort had gone away, and I had this experience repeatedly whenever it came back. So I believe that there's a lot of experimentation that's probably worth doing with sarolite, azestulite, as a facilitator for healing. And I can tell you for sure that in my experience, it's an incredible stone for emotional healing. It really dissolves away the stressful energy and brings in a vibration of love and gentleness and peace that, I mean, it isn't just me. In my shop and in my workshops, I probably say I have heard several hundred people express that very same thing. So, I recommend many stones to people with a lot of enthusiasm, and this is right up there at the top of my list because, the world is in a state where everybody could use a little oasis of peace inside themselves, and these stones really do help bring that. So what else can I say to you before we close this? I thought, well, I'll do a 10 or 15 minute video, and we're up to 41 minutes now, so I'm going to try to slow down. You can see by the speed that I'm talking, I have a lot I want to share. I guess what I want to say is a few things that we're going to do at the Alchemy of Stones workshop. We'll learn to communicate with a stone being, as in fact multiple stone beings, as I mentioned to you earlier. We'll also learn how to empower that stone being through our focused intention and attention. One of the things that is, I think, a rather new idea in crystal work that I've come to and I feel really sure about is that we can make stones stronger. Our attention to them and our intention when we express it as this circulation between the stone and ourselves, an offering of well-wishing, a blessing you might say, from us to the being of the stone, and then coupled with an invitation to the stone to let its energies flow into us. This is a circulation. This is the old alchemical symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake that bites its own tail. It's a feedback loop. And I think that I can demonstrate to you in the workshop that nature and the evolution that we see in nature all happens through these feedback processes. So the alchemists in conceiving of the snake that bites its own tail and eats its own tail and grows from the eating of its tail, that's an amazingly clear metaphor for the idea of a feedback loop that doesn't just repeat itself, but expands and becomes more like a spiral, where the energy that is created through that process gets bigger and bigger. And in alchemy, the old alchemists who used stoves and flasks and all that stuff, they had a special flask they called the pelican, because it looked rather like a pelican with his beak pointing down into his chest, and it would circulate the vapors of whatever they had on the stove and condense them in that neck, and then come back down into the flask and circulate it, circulate and circulate. It was a physical feedback loop that they used to refine substances in the physical aspects of alchemy. But the alchemists believed the old adage, as above, so below, or as within, so without. So the things they set up with their apparatus, were meant to mirror and be mirrored by internal processes. The alchemists didn't draw a line between inner and outer. They tried to unify them. So if an alchemist was using a circulating flask on the stove, she was also doing a circulation of energy inside herself meditatively. And it's clear through much of the alchemical writings that the alchemists were meditators, and that they thought that the way that their own state of being was in a particular moment would affect the outer manifestations they were doing in their experiments. So I completely agree with that. and feel like what we do with stones is an example of that, because we have physical stones, we have invisible energy. We work on that energetic level, circulating with the stone being. And just as a stone's energy can empower us, we can empower the energy of that stone. And that's what actually makes stones stronger. I personally think that the history of azeztulite over the last 20 years is a great example of it. At the beginning, when there were only a few pieces of azeztulite that had been discovered, and when only a few people had worked with them, it was harder for people who were not already highly sensitive to feel them. But now, as I introduce them to people, even people who don't feel stone energies tend to be able to feel azeztulite. And I believe that's because the human use and engagement with the beings and the stones has made them more powerful. And that also, I think, is why they've been discovered in more places around the world. The Azez beings, that angelic group soul, said at the beginning that more varieties of azeztulite would be found around the earth as more people worked with it. And this has come true. So there's another aspect. We're not only doing the alchemy of self-transformation. In the alchemy of stones, we aspire to world transformation. And self and world transformation go hand in hand. As above, so below. So there's just so much we can do if we realize more of what and who we are, and what and who the stone beings are, and what and who the soul of the world is. And this is really the whole intention of my work now, and of the Alchemy of Stones book that I'm writing, and of the Alchemy of Stones events that I'm offering. I feel that alchemy turns out to be a worldview through which we can understand much better and get much more out of our work with stones and their energies. The world becomes alive when we take on the alchemical worldview. The stones, when we view them as beings, are interactive with us, and we begin to then understand why we intuitively love them. And our love for the earth opens up as well on this path. And as it turns out, just as I said, we nourish the stone beings through our intention and empower them that way. We do this for the soul of the world. In another video, I'll probably talk to you about the inner experiences I've had meeting Sophia, the soul of the world, and seeing that she needs human assistance. She needs our engagement. We're the children of the soul of the world, but the relationship needs to be symbiotic. It needs to be a two-way street. The world needs our love and our attention and our appreciation every bit as much as we need the gifts that the stones bring to us. So, with that idea, maybe I'll leave you now, and I hope some of you at least made it all the way to the end of this video. It was fun for me to let myself ramble a bit to you, and we sort of traveled around some loops about what some of the stones are about, and what some of this work is about. And one of the things I always like to say is this isn't just a path of work, it's a path of joy, it's a path of love, it's a path of fulfillment. And in the alchemy of stones, we do very serious work lightly. So it's important for us to remember that, because the Sufis believe that when we go to the next world, there's an angel that cuts your heart out, puts it on a scale, and on the other side is a feather. And if your heart is not as light as that feather, you can't get into heaven. So we try to do serious work, but we do it lightly. And with that, I say thanks, and I'm sure I'll offer you another one of these very soon. And I hope that as many of you as can will come to the Alchemy of Stones event. So I should give you contact info, right? Call 1-800-942-9423. That's our office in Vermont to get more information. Or visit our website, www.heavenandearthjewelry.com. heavenandearthjewelry.com. That's our website, and that's where there's a lot of information about the Alchemy of Stones event, June 11th to 14th of 2020. I'm going to be there, and I'm looking to meet as many of you as can come. If you have any questions about whether you should or not, I suggest you bring your attention to your heart and ask that question, and then listen to what comes back. All right, many blessings, and thank you for watching. Bye.